Hello and welcome to this video. My name's Beckham and the subject here is layers basics. We're going to create a simple composite. In fact, we're going to introduce layers and layer masks. There's very little doubt that layers are the powerhouse of Photoshop. If you're not using layers, it's rather like driving a car without tyres. Yes, you're going to move along the road for a while, but it'll be uncomfortable and you're soon going to grind to a stop. Layers offers support for our day-to-day editing, image layouts, almost all of our creative work, and much more besides. Layer masks extend Photoshop layers to a point where they are almost indispensable. So the big question with layers is, where do we start? I could do a lengthy explanation on how layers work, but I think there's probably a better way. What I'd like to do is to find 2 or 3 layers projects that will give us a practical project to work on. Then we have a target idea to focus our attention, but we also learn an awful lot about layers as we do the work required. Now you may find it helpful if you can view my YouTube video called Creative Cloud: The Concept of Layers. So the first of these projects is a layered composite that requires just 2 images, but we're also going to introduce a mask. Now I've worked through 2 images through Camera Raw. I've tried to do them both as identical as I can, but I'm sure we're going to see some differences between the 2, although they're very similar. There's one of the images and there's the other. You can see at the moment they're both open up into Photoshop, but at the moment of course they're separate images. If I select Eagle 2, we see the thumbnail on the right. If I select Eagle 1, we see Eagle 1's thumbnail on the right. What I need to do here is to make a layered stack of these 2. There's a couple of ways we can do this. We can do it with copy and paste in the normal way. Select all, copy and paste one image into another. My favourite way is just to drag the tab out from the top of the screen, and with the move tool selected I click, drag and drop, and there's one image on top of the other. I don't need Eagle 1 anymore. I can close that down because there's the 2 layers we can see there, and I can move it around with my move tool and even snap it into position. So what we're looking at with the layers palette up in the top right then is 2 layers, and we can select either of these layers and we can edit them independently of the other layer, and in fact we can have as many layers as we wish. Now let me describe exactly what we have here, but what I'd like to do is to turn both of these layers off. We can do that by just clicking the little eye alongside. Because what I want to ask you to imagine is, supposing we had a physical print of the eagle that we can see as the bottom layer here. Let's imagine that it is a physical print and we've just laid it on the bench in front of us. What we've then done is laid on top of that another physical print, and of course this one is going to hide the one underneath. But because we can edit any one of our images independently of the other, we can resize this one, we can rotate it, we can position it, and we're going to do just that, making our simple composite. Now whenever we create a composite or a montage, and the techniques are much the same, then we're in charge of the composition. We have to make sure that the elements we're introducing are going to be strong from a compositional point of view. Just for the moment, let me turn off my top layer. I want to pick up my crop tool and just click on the bottom layer here, just so I can see the overlay. Now the bird is in a strong position, so it may be a good idea if I can get the other bird maybe lying diagonal across here which is another strong position. So let's have a go at doing that by first removing the crop. Let me pick up my move tool to get rid of the bounding box around the edge, and I'll turn my top layer back on. Now, to get layer 1 into the right angle, size and position, it will be useful if I could see the other layer too. Well, we can do that temporarily by just going to the opacity of layer 1 and just dropping it down to about 50%, only for a short while until we get the bird in position. Now we're going to move this bird, rotate it, and probably reduce its size as well. To do that, we need our transform tools. For those, we'll find them in the edit menu. So let's go to edit, free transform. There's the one we want. Control T is the shortcut. A bounding box appears around the outer edge. I can go up to the options at the top of the screen. There's a little chain link, as you can see there. If I click it, when I drag a corner toggle, it makes sure that the height and the width of the image remain in register. Otherwise, we would distort the bird. I can click inside the transform box and I can move it, and when I go outside I get a little two linked arrow icon which allows me to rotate the bird. So I was thinking that I needed the bird somewhere around that position. Now let me commit that by hitting the tick on the options bar there, and then I'll push my opacity back up to 100%. Now I'm just going to take a look at the crop tool again, and I didn't get that too bad. If I was being super critical, I could move it just a little bit to the left and maybe down a small amount. Well, let's do it. All we need to do is to select the layer, select the move tool from the top of the toolbox, a little bit to the left, a little bit down, and I think that's going to be just about perfect. But we've got an obvious problem that we need to deal with next. Now there's a couple of ways we could deal with the blue sky with layer 1, and I may, time permitting, show you both. But let's start off with a layer mask. What we're going to do is apply a layer mask to this top layer. Let's do that first. Down at the bottom left of the layers we click, and a white square will appear to the right of layer 1. You'll notice that it appears to have a frame around it. That's telling us that the mask has been created and selected. Now if you look over to the color picker on the left hand side, as I select the image rather than the mask, and this is what we would have to do if we wanted to edit the image rather than just mask it, then you'll notice that any colors we were previously using will appear in the color picker. But when I go back and select my mask, they go back and default to black and white. That's giving us an important clue as to how the masks work. If we paint black onto the mask, you need to imagine the mask as being an invisible white square sitting over the image, because although we see the mask here, of course any painting we do is on the image itself. Now I think this is best demonstrated. So let me go to my color picker and select black as my foreground color. Now we can do that with the two linked arrows here, but the X key is much more convenient. As you can see, as I touch the X key, the background and foreground colors toggle backwards and forth, and when we're working on masks that can be quite useful. I'm going to pick up my brush, the standard soft edge brush. The opacity of the brush is 100%. The flow I'll push up to 100% too, and then I'll start brushing over here, and you can see exactly what happens. I'm taking away the bird up on the top right. Well, in actual fact I'm not entirely doing that, because if you look at the thumbnail up here you can still see the bird is fully in place. Now if we use that X key, I can toggle from my foreground colour being black to white, saves me going all the way over to the other side of the screen, and now I can start painting white onto my mask. And as I do so, of course, I'm effectively repairing the masks, so bringing back the pixels. But even that's not the right thing to say, because the pixels weren't actually erased in the first place. Now sometimes when we do that, you can see I've left a little bit there and I would need to go over that, but we can flood the mask with white or black. Here's a couple of shortcut keys which are well worth writing down and remembering because they are very useful. Alt backspace. I've just flooded my mask with white because Alt backspace will flood our foreground colour, whatever we've chosen, and Control backspace will always flood our background colour, whatever we've chosen. Now we can use any of the tools of Photoshop to apply black or shades of black to the mask. So we can use the brush, we can use any other tools, but the one I'd like to use is the gradient tool. First of all, let me switch my mask back to black as my foreground. I'm going to pick up my gradient tool from the toolbox, and this works very similar to the gradient filter in Adobe Camera Raw. Along the top of the screen, the default option is linear, this one here, so I'm not going to change that. But the option I want from in this drop down box is foreground to transparent. There you can see the option, you can see the little checkerboard effect, which shows we're going to be creating a gradient that starts black but ends completely clear. And now it's reflected in the little icon at the top left. Now this tool works very similar to the one in Adobe Camera Raw in that we click and drag, and that provides the starting point of the gradient and the end point. As long as I don't go too far into the bird, then the black is going to peter out before it reaches the bird, and the effect is we get a lovely blend into the picture of the two blues. I may have to do a little bit of extra work with a brush there, but that's no problem. We've got a straight line down there, so I'm going to start just inside. I'm just going to drag in just a short distance into the wingtip of the bird. There's the other gradient. Up here I'm going to do exactly the same, and finally on the right hand side, and we've got a result. The only problem we've got is a little bit of ghosting there. Well, let's switch to our brush, a normal soft edge brush. I'm going to drop my flow rate way down to about that and just go over that bit just to bring that through, and I think we have a really good result. So when we've got a layer mask applied to the image, I can hold the Shift key and click the mask and it temporarily turns it off. If I want to bring the mask back, I just click the mask and we're back in play. If I hold the Alt key and I click the mask, we see the mask on screen, and we can even edit the mask while it's on screen like this, and sometimes even that can be an advantage. To bring it back, just click the little eyes next to the layer and we're back in play. Now there was a slight difference between the shades of blue. I'm going to turn this one on and off. Now you can just see a slight difference when I do this. This image needs to be slightly darker, just a couple of shades darker. Now if I wanted to do that, of course I've got to make sure I select the layer, not the mask. So if I select the layer, I'm going to bring up my levels and just adjust the mid-tone a little bit. So I'm going to go to my image menu to find it, Image, Adjustments, Levels. There's the mid-tone slider. I'm going to put my cursor in there because we need to, if I just hit my up arrow, you can see exactly what happens. It goes too light. Let me bring it back to the setting of 1. I'm just clicking and holding here. There, we're back to 1, and if I hit the down arrow, of course, we go far too dark. All we need is just a tiny amount. Let's see if we can zero in on it. 1, 2, 3. I think that is just about perfect. I've just darkened it a wee bit, and it just about balances up those two tones of blue. So as I turn it on and off, I can't even see any difference. Now it's good practice to save this as a Photoshop file, because if we do that, we save both of these layers and the mask. So that if we wake up tomorrow, look at the image and realize we've made a mistake somewhere, we can open this back up to a position where we left it, and we can fix or repair things quickly and easily. But there does come a point when we need to say we have finished the image and we'd want to put all of these layers and the mask together. We can do that from the top left of the screen in the normal menus, but I think it's probably more convenient top right of the layers, down the bottom, flatten the image to finish. Now, although I've taken the opportunity to demonstrate a layer mask here, there probably was a marginally easier, or certainly a slightly quicker way of doing this, but it's because the two images that I'm putting together both come from a background that's almost identical. Just for a moment, I'm going to go to my history, and I'm going to go back just before I flattened the image, and back to my layers. I'm also going to remove my mask. Now let me show you what happens when we do that. I'm going to drag it down and drop it in the bin, and we get this little flag appear. What it's telling us is, are you sure you want to do this? Are you sure you don't want to just cancel and carry on? Do you really want to delete the mask, or do you want to apply the mask? Well, let me click apply here just so you can see what happens. I can always use my undo history to back away from that too. You can see the mask disappears, but its effect is now permanent on the image that we've got there. So what I'm going to do is go back to my history and come back away from that, back to my layers, and I'll drop this in the bin, and this time I'll say yes, I did mean to delete it. Now we've got our sky covering up the wing of the bird. So what we're going to do here is we're going to use a selection. We can get away with using a selection here because the two blues are so similar to one another. So what I'm going to do is select the layer at the top, or the bird at the top right, go to my toolbox and select the magic wand. The magic wand is an automatic selection tool, and I'm going to use it with all of the default settings on the top of the screen. I'm changing nothing there. In fact, I'll turn that other layer off for a moment so we can see exactly what we're working on, just this one. When I click into the sky, of course, the magic wand is clever enough to pick up everything. I need to have a bit of softness around the wings. Believe it or not, we can have things too sharp sometimes. They don't look quite real. So I'm going to go to my select and mask option at the top of the screen, and either use a feather of about 1 or sometimes even 0.5. I think that's the smallest you can go, and I'll click OK. So we've got a tiny amount of softness in that line. Now I need to cut all of the pixels that are selected. We can do that from the edit menu at the top left and choose edit cut, but a shortcut key is Control X. And when I turn the bottom layer on, we've got a great result. Now let's just check to make sure we do. I'll try to zoom in over those two areas, because I want to look at this one which I've cut out, and it's sitting over the top of this one, and the wings, they both look as good as each other. So that's a pretty good guide that we've got a good piece of work here. And once again, we would save this as a layered file, but at some stage we're possibly going to want to flatten the two together to finish. Why not come along to my website and visit my photo and audio visual forum? It costs nothing to join. You can get access to me, ask your layers questions, and also meet others with the same passion as yourself.